Okay, Bobby, okay. I do see at the very top of your screen, there's like a bar.
Yeah, every time someone pops into the waiting room,
Okay,
that
it'll
comes
pop.
up and it covers the screen. So there's not a lot I can do about that. I
Okay,
basically have to make sure what I'm sharing does not get covered by other stuff. So I'll just do my best.
all right, I'm admitting him.
Good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you're going to join us for our special presentation about tips for first-generation college students. We're going to get started here in just a few seconds. We're going to let a few more folks come in, but thank you for being with us on a Monday night. We're excited to have you. We'll get started shortly. All right. Good evening, everyone. We are so excited that you are here tonight, live from Wichita State, right on campus. My name is Bobby Gandu. I'm Assistant Vice President and Director of Admissions, and it's our pleasure to have you today for our special session and presentation about first-generation college students. We have a lot of familiarity of serving and working with first-generation college students, and so this was a new idea on our part. We wanted to make sure that students who would be first in their family to go to college would have an opportunity to kind of work through the terminology of going to college, get better acquainted with the services that are available, and hear from students who are walking the first gen experience. So today you're stuck with me for a little bit in terms of being on camera and doing the majority of the speaking duties. But behind the scenes, I have a couple of my colleagues, Dawson Long, who works in the Office of Admissions, and then also Elsie Hernandez, who's our diversity recruiter for the Office of Admissions. I do want to give a particular shout out to her because she's worked really hard on putting this event together. So thank you, Elsie, for all of your work to make this event get going. So that being said, as folks are arriving, we're going to admit them into the room, but I'm going to get going on our presentation. So one thing that we want to make sure you're aware of, or actually before I begin, today's the agenda. Here's the agenda for what we're going to be covering tonight. First, we're going to talk about what a first generation student is, or at least how we define it at Wichita State. We're going to talk through some college terminology that you may or may not be familiar with. A big part of college is just figuring out the language and the lingo. So we're going to spend time on that. Then we will talk about some specific challenges that first-gen students tend to face. And then we'll transition into a really quick video that showcases some of our first-gen students and wrap up with just a couple of last segments. One will be some specific tips that we'd offer students for college success. And the best part of the program, in my opinion, will be hearing from a few of our students who are living the first-gen experience at Wichita State right now. So you'll actually have an opportunity to ask them questions about the experience. So be thinking of things that perhaps I don't cover or get to that you want to make sure you ask before the end of the night. I would encourage you to ask questions in the chat if you have any, if you think of any, either while I'm talking or while our students are talking. We'd love to make sure we address those questions. Either I will try to answer them or my colleagues Dawson and Elsie will try to answer them in the chat if I can't get to them. So that being said, I'm going to jump on our presentation here. I would tell you that we are recording this, so we'll share this after the event for all of you who are joining us, and it will be available later for anyone you may want to share it with who wasn't able to join us live. All right. So first generation, what does it mean? How do we define it? It's a little different at every college and university. So depending on if you're looking at other colleges, you may want to check with them. Generally speaking, it's the student or our students who are the first in their family to attend college. More specifically at Wichita State, we say a first generation student is someone whose parents did not complete a 4-year university experience. It could be that a parent completed a 2-year degree, but we're really looking for students who have not yet completed that, or whose parents have not yet completed that 4-year degree. And that's how we define it at Wichita State. And at Wichita State, if you are a first-gen student and you plan to attend and be a shocker this fall, I would tell you that you'll be in really good company. More than 40% of our students are first generation. And so for us, that means we're well aware of the makeup of our students. We want to make sure we're doing our very best to serve them. There's a lot of resources available, and we'll be talking about some of those today, as you could guess. So we wanted to start out and make sure we just covered some of the terminology that you may or may not be familiar with. So by the way, again, we're going to send this slide deck out as part of the follow-up from this event. But if you want to take screenshots or pictures with your phone, feel free to. There's a lot of information on these slides, and we're breaking like every rule you can think of probably with PowerPoint in terms of putting a lot of text on the slides. But we're doing it because we want to make sure you've got the resource and you can look at it later in case you want to dive a little further beyond what I have to share. So first up, major. Many of you have already applied for admission to Wichita State or somewhere else, and you probably picked a major that you were interested in. And so that's, of course, what you're going to spend most of your time studying in college. A credit hour is something that I didn't know, and that's probably one thing that I should have shared at the start of this, is that I was a first generation student. I'm the child of immigrants. My parents did not go to college in the United States, and so it was all kind of a learning process for me. So I would again begin by telling you that if I can figure it out, I know all of you can too. But one of the things that I remember when I started as a freshman, I didn't really understand what a credit hour was. So here we've said that it's the number of hours you typically spend in the classroom for a particular class that you're taking. A full-time class load at Wichita State and most other colleges is about 12 credit hours at least. Most generally, students will take between 12 and 15 credit hours per semester. Then the classes that you're taking, it could range in terms of the number of credit hours that it is. Many classes are 3 credit hours. Some of your science and math courses might be 5 credit hours. Some of your science classes might have a lab with it, so that might be 1 credit hour. It just kind of depends. But as you're enrolling, then that will be very clear in terms of the number of credit hours you're taking for each class. In college, we use terminology that's probably similar to what you're used to in high school. We say semesters. And so for Wichita State and many other colleges, we say that we have a fall, a spring, and a summer semester. And then we put here in parentheses what month that those semesters start. Then tuition. You will probably hear phrases like tuition and fees. So you may be wondering, what does that mean? So tuition for Wichita State and for most other schools, it's the price that you're going to pay for classes. It might be extended in terms of the phrasing. It may say tuition and fees. Pretty much it usually means the same thing, but of course you should always double check with what institution you're attending. And it varies, of course, from university to university. Here in Kansas, we like to brag that we're the most affordable research university in Kansas, that we really have tried to price ourselves at a point where we can be accessible to all students, but in many cases, we're, I think, well priced for first generation students. What is often separate from tuition are extra fees, such as living on campus. So that would be like room and board and living in the dorm, books and supplies. That's extra typically. Transportation, so you might be living on campus, but perhaps you need to drive to campus wherever you're originally from. Perhaps you need to take a bus or flight, whatever the case is. Just remember that that is extra and something you would pay separate from your tuition and fees. And then personal expenses, just like life would happen. If you weren't going to college, you're going to have extra expenses along the way. So you'll want to be thinking about that and saving money for that as well. So what you're working toward in college is very typically a 4-year academic degree. It's not always 4 years. For many of our degrees, that's kind of the typical experience. Sometimes for some of our majors, sometimes engineering majors take a little bit longer, but the plus side of some of our those majors engineering are that they often have students often have internships. Sometimes students don't even take classes for a semester and they instead focus on an internship. So it really just depends, but oftentimes it's a 4-year degree. On the next column there, you see that we just remind you that we don't necessarily say teachers in college. We instead often say faculty, and that's your instructor. Academic advisor is someone who is going to help you not only select your classes, but really help you understand all of the wealth of resources that are available on a college campus. So it's someone that you want to make sure you have a good relationship with whenever you arrive to college, because that person is a really great resource for you in case you do get in trouble and you do need some extra help. A syllabus. Every college professor is going to pass out at the very start of the class, most often the first day of class, what's called the syllabus. And so what that is it's kind of an outline of the plan from the faculty member of what they're going to cover in class. It typically includes quiz dates, test dates, topics that they're going to cover on each day. It's going to cover things like a plagiarism policy about what's going to happen if you cheat in the class. It's going to also talk about if you have special accessibility needs. It's also going to cover their office hours. So every college professor is going to have hours that are accessible to you. Sometimes they might be in person, and sometimes it could be via Zoom or other virtual category. But just make sure you look at that syllabus. I think some of our students who are really on top of it at the start of the semester, they'll grab all of their syllabi, that's the plural for syllabus. They'll grab all of their syllabi for all their classes that they're taking and then load key dates into their calendar. So then that way, you might have a college algebra test coming up, or that you have a big project due in a certain class. So then you can plan the rest of your schedule around that. At Wichita State and most other universities, we say academic colleges. So at Wichita State, we have 8 degree granting academic colleges. So that would include like business, engineering, health professions, the College of Applied Studies, which includes our School of Education. So again, we have 8 of these, and it's kind of how we break down the academic units at Wichita State. Think of it a little bit like Harry Potter. If you've watched Harry Potter, they have different houses. So very similar to that, we kind of have different houses or colleges at most universities. Another thing to be aware of is general education. Just about every major and program that we have, everyone has to complete general education. And it looks a little different just depending on which major, but that means you're going to have to take some English classes. You're going to have to take some communication or speech courses. You're going to have to take a math class, science class. And of course, depending on your major, you may have to take more than one, but it's something that every student is required to complete. So just be aware of that. And then the last thing we put on here is elective. So typically those are courses that are outside your major area of study that will still count towards your degree, but sometimes you have a little bit more flexibility in picking those courses, particularly when working with your advisor. So hopefully that gets you better acquainted with some of the terminology that you might experience in a college setting. Then next, I'm going to transition into a little bit of what first generation students tend to face. This probably is not a comprehensive list, but it's something you might want to kind of wrap your brain around and start thinking about before you enter college. And I would challenge our student ambassadors who will be on a little bit later. I think I saw a couple of them already jump on. I would encourage them to be thinking about the ones that I'm going to share. I'm sure there's others that they might share that are very personal for them. So if they're willing and able, they're more than welcome to elaborate on some of their experiences and the challenges they faced. So first up, academic challenges. This was something that was really relevant for me when I started college. I did okay in high school. I think I was a pretty good student, but I was really nervous about getting into college and what my college setting would be like. I was worried that I might have attended a high school that perhaps didn't prepare me as academically well as some of my friends in college that I got to know a little bit later. And I just didn't have a model in my home. My parents loved me very much. They did everything they they could for me, but they didn't attend college. And so they weren't really in the best place to kind of prepare me for what to expect in a college classroom. So I think it's true for a lot of our first generation students, because we have a little less exposure to college from our parents and other relatives, that sometimes it's a challenge to integrate into a college classroom and get to know some other people. I mentioned that sometimes you might feel a little less prepared than other people that you're meeting in college. And another thing that I learned was, just because some of my college classmates picked up some things more quickly than I did, that meant I had to spend more time studying certain topics or spend more time on my notes for class. So again, just want to mentally prepare you that this might be what some of your experiences could be. Some schools I mentioned might not have had the ability to prepare students as well. It could be because they didn't have as many resources or support structure at that school. Some of us, and I put myself in this category, we don't do well on standardized tests. So perhaps we didn't do well in the ACT or SAT, or that doesn't maybe reflect the best of our abilities. And I would tell you that that's okay. You can be just fine in college, even if you don't do well on some of those standardized tests. And ultimately, what that all leads to is sometimes first generation students, we walk into a classroom and we feel like that we're less confident, or we don't feel confident when we're sitting in those college classrooms interacting with our peers in class or asking questions of our faculty. And I just want to assure you that it's okay. Faculty are very disciplined and professional in what they're doing, and they are well aware that students in their classroom may really come from a range of life circumstances, some of which have gone to college, some of our students have gone to college, or had parents who have gone to college, and some of which are going to be first generation. The other thing we find with some of our students is that, the academic structure at any college or university, it's really complex. There's a lot going on. And so because we just haven't had parents who have gone to college, they may find difficulty coaching you through that experience. A lot of times our first gen students aren't aware of all of the wonderful resources that are available in a college setting. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but we want you to know every college, every university exists and can only be successful if students take advantage of the resources that are available for them. So I would just tell you that a lot of times students aren't aware of those resources. So you have to ask questions to make sure you become aware of those success resources. And then the last thing that we put on here is that first gen students, they often have difficulty finding mentors, especially if they don't get involved or connected on campus. I'll tell you, my success tip and strategy for finding a mentor for me was I found an on-campus job. And my on-campus job was coincidentally in the Office of Admissions. And, here I am a couple decades later, and I'm working in admissions. But what I would tell you is that there are people on a college campus, staff and faculty, who are so invested in your success. So if you are able to find an on-campus job, no matter where you go to college, I will bet that there's going to be someone in that office who's going to be a great resource for you, not just because they are your employer and going to, give you some direction at your work while you're working on campus, but because they care about you and they want to see you be successful. So then if you do run into problems in a college class, or if you get a parking ticket and you don't know how to pay it, or if you can't make ends meet for a particular reason, then your employer, who cares about your work and your experience in that setting, is also going to care about you as a person and as a college student. So they're probably going to have some good advice for you on how to navigate that. Next up, I want to talk a little bit about some of the psychological challenges that exist for us first gen students. I know for me, again, the child of immigrants, my parents didn't make a lot of money. And so because I wasn't at home anymore, I moved about 2 hours away to go to college, specifically to Wichita State. I felt guilty about leaving my parents. I'm the youngest in my family. And so my sister had already left and moved out of town. And I was worried about leaving my parents to kind of just deal with everything at home. And so it's fair to say that we carry some guilt because of that. And we also feel guilty because sometimes we have opportunities to do things in college that we know our parents didn't have, or maybe even our siblings didn't have. So again, just a lot of guilt can be accompanied with going to college. Then the last thing we put on here for this particular section is that leaving family behind to attend college really isn't easy for first-gen students, because sometimes we can experience homesickness, loneliness, mixed in with the guilt. So it's kind of like we're doubling up on some of the challenges we face. And so I would just tell you that if and when you feel this way for any of these items, you're not alone, that these are normal things to happen. And while it's okay to feel that way, we want to remind you that you can continue to try to work through those and have resources to help you be successful. Another thing that we found when we asked students, and we even asked some of our staff about this in terms of what first-gen students face, sometimes you feel like an imposter. You may feel like you don't belong on a college campus. And again, that's normal to feel like that, because you just perhaps haven't had college modeled for you. And so we just want to remind you that you belong for a reason. You've been accepted to attend college for a reason. We have seen something in you at Wichita State. My hope is that you've received some scholarships either from Wichita State or somewhere else. And so it really demonstrates, hopefully to you, that we see something in you and that you're not an imposter, that you do belong at Wichita State, and that we know you can be successful. Again, we've talked about this a lot, but it's an ongoing theme in really everything with going to college for first-gen students, but you sometimes will just feel like you're not as prepared as other students, and that's okay. You just have to work through it. We talked a little bit about this, but here's some really good specific examples of things that sometimes our first-gen students don't know about. But if you're attending college, very likely, and I know this is true at Wichita State, but it's also true in most other places, if you don't have access to an affordable healthcare plan, either through your family and your parents' jobs, then there's a good chance that your campus, your university offers an affordable healthcare plan. And even better, most of us, including Wichita State, we have a student health services right on our campus that's very affordable, that they can offer prescriptions, they can offer some testing, you can get right in. So particularly for students who might be going away for college, where you don't have access to your regular doctors and healthcare system because you're in Wichita going to college, you can access our on-campus healthcare services that are available to all of our students. You may not be familiar with some work study options or internships and counseling. So I just want to assure you, especially in today's day and age with the way workforce is, we can't even fill all of the jobs that we have on our campus. And again, I would say that I know that's true in a lot of other colleges these days. So when you are able to secure those opportunities, or make sure that if you are interested in those, that you do go out and seek those out and secure those opportunities. The last thing that's on here is, we know that going to college is a time of excitement, nervousness, enthusiasm, but we know that it's going to be a challenge to work through. When I attended college a long time ago, I moved 2 hours away, and we didn't have the benefits of Instagram, other social media. I didn't even pick up the phone and call the person or even text message the person who I was going to be living with when I went to college. So I was really nervous about that. So again, I'm a lot older than all of you, but I would tell you that I moved in my first dorm experience at Wichita State. I didn't know anything about my roommate, and there was no such thing as Facebook back in the day. There's no way for me to look up my future college roommate. So I basically arrived in my dorm in August. And then the guy who moved in and I'm from Topeka, Kansas originally, to give you a little context, and I went to a really diverse high school. So I was really familiar with an urban setting. But the guy that I roomed with, he couldn't have been more different from me. He was from rural Texas. He wore a black trench coat everywhere he went. And in August too, it was really hot. He listened to a different kind of music. I listened to hip hop and rap, and he listened to heavy metal and like 80s rock. So it was just like very different from me. But I'll tell you what, he and I became fast friends. He was in my wedding, I was in his wedding, and we still remain friends and keep up to this day. So there's kind of something to be said about the college environment, that even though you are probably feeling anxious and nervous and excited, the people you're going to be surrounded with are feeling the same way, frankly, whether or not they're first generation students. Financial concerns. So I know for all of us, again, really, whether you're first gen or not, you're probably thinking about how am I going to pay for college and how am I going to fund what could be a really expensive experience. And so I would tell you that, of course, there's resources all along the way to help pay for those, but we're all, as first gen students, we're starting out at a lower baseline than some of our other students who have started out with someone in their home who's been to college before. So we just want to put that up front and make you aware that we know that will be a concern. We have something called the Office of Student Money Management that's available. It's housed within our Office of Financial Aid, and those services are available to really help coach students, not just on paying for college, but also how to properly manage your money while you are in college. And then the last section that we wrote on here was that a lot of times our first gen students are coming from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. They might live to a higher degree in poverty. There are some challenges, of course, associated with that. And so we do have some resources available, which I'll talk about a little later. But the point here is that we want to acknowledge that for those of us who are first gen, when we step into college, there's some real financial issues that we're going to be pressing up against, and they can hinder our ability to achieve success. So we're well aware of that at Wichita State, and we want to help our students work through that. All right, lastly, before I get to a quick video, social challenges. So again, it's just kind of an ongoing theme that when we don't have college modeled for us, we may not have all the guidance we need. A lot of high schools have really great counselors in place that can help coach students, not only for the college search process, but even help give them advice for when they're going to be in college. But we know not all high schools are resourced that way to give a lot of clear guidance for students. Again, we talked about this a little bit, but sometimes students can feel isolated. So perhaps another tip from Bobby as the presenter here today would be that the isolation feeling is real, especially with where we are kind of post-pandemic. But if I can beg and urge you to do one of a few things in college, one of them would be to get involved, find some passion, find your people. That's what we often say, because your people can be your lifeline for college success. And it's okay if that group is as random as the hammock club on our campus. I think at some point, I don't know that we still have it, but we had a bacon club on campus. Or it could be a fraternity or a sorority, or as I mentioned earlier, it could be your on-campus job where you get to meet some other people. But it's about finding your people, your community, because we know that feelings of isolation are real and they can happen. But if you know who your people are at the end of the day, you've got someone you can hang out with in between or after classes. You have someone that you are going to be able to dine with in the dining halls or have lunch with over in our student center. It's really important that you get involved in some activities. It doesn't have to be 10, but it should be a couple. That's at least what I would recommend. Find a couple of activities that are meaningful for you that you might be able to find some passion with. And then stigma and discrimination. So with first gen students, sometimes we might feel like people are looking at us or that they have negative feelings or impressions about us. Sometimes first gen students can be marginalized, not intentionally, but that's just kind of the outcome of being a first generation student. And we know that oftentimes that can impact mental health and academic performance. So those are real things. And so part of the last few slides, which I feel like are kind of downers here, but it's important we talk about them. And so then that way, if and when you experience some of these things, you know that you aren't alone in going through some of these feelings and experiences. So with that being said, I'm going to kick up a video that hopefully kind of sets the tone for that. You know what? You can be successful in college, whether you land at Wichita State or somewhere else. So last fall, we put together a video that highlighted some of the things that our students have gone through and some of the tips that they recommend. It's about a 3-minute video, so we'll play for just a little bit. But I think it really nicely encapsulates the experience of some of our first-gen students. And I would also tell you that why we were able to interview several of our first-gen students is that they were actually just starting or finishing up a first-gen student organization meeting that we have. So we actually have a student club or a student organization of just first-gen students. And so this would really be a great group that you could be a part of should you choose to be a shocker. So I'm going to be quiet for a few minutes and let this video play.
we'll start with straight speak. My name is Gary Tran. I'm a freshman studying aerospace engineering here at Wichita State University. We're going to talk to some first-gen students today. I am one myself, and these first-gen students are struggling with first-gen family alcohol degree. Wichita State has plenty of resources that aid these first-gen shoppers academically and do feel good. Let's go talk. How do you feel about the first students to go to college in Finland? It is kind of a big deal, so you should celebrate that.
It's been really exciting to start a new journey
where I'm going, but I'm excited just to
get to know more people, get more knowledge. I'm kind of excited, but also very stressed because I don't know what's coming. I don't know what to expect, and I have that support from other people. But I'm excited because I get to
It's a huge accomplishment, but it's a lot of pressure. But it's actually really exciting for me.
What's a piece of advice you would like to give to some confident I think they people have the confidence to have comfortable, have confidence to push yourself and work properly. Definitely start off right.
to do everything earlier than everyone else, get all what we can, get all the information. I'm a transfer student as well as a first generation, so just get started on everything from Wednesday to Thursday to Monday, get it done right and I'm
Both not knowing what to do
curious. Getting to know hard, but I'm scary.
The advice would be just work on yourself and focus on yourself and don't fall into like pressure of making your family happy. I felt like I did that a lot, like my parents and my family wanted me to do. But now I'm a junior and I'm just thinking about what I want to do and what I can do.
Thank you to all the first gen workers and share their stories with you. If you're a first gen student, want to get more, make sure you reach out to the first generation students. Go Shots!
Right. So I know there was there might have been some snags in the audio, so apologize for that if the audio didn't come through on your side. So we'll make sure we send that out as a full link that you can just watch on YouTube later on. All right, moving along. We have several tips on here. So again, I know we broke like every rule for PowerPoint where you should only have a certain number of words on a slide, but we just thought it was so important to put the information out there and give you an opportunity if you wanted to take a screenshot or otherwise that the information's there. So first off, the tips that we'd offer, manage your time wisely, which would include setting priorities. You're going to pay a lot of money for college. And so we would encourage you to make sure academics are a priority for you. But you also, that doesn't mean you ignore your family or your personal life or your job. If you have a job that's probably helping you pay for college, but just kind of know that you're going to have to set some priorities and perhaps give up a few things too. Keep a weekly planner. We do a lot of panels with our current students and we ask them what advice they would give to future college students. And one of the top recommendations is inevitably buy a planner or at least utilize a calendar function on your phone or an app. Of course, many students will use the Google Calendar that's delivered. They'll use, a whole range of calendar services and reminders. So just make sure whatever your service is that works for you, your solution is that works for you, use it. That's the key. Make sure that you load key dates, reminders in there, that you block time for studying, that you are aware of your work schedule and that's loaded on there, that your test schedule is loaded on there. So then that way you can kind of plan ahead and be a successful student. Another thing is, we encourage students to sometimes have to say no, and that means no to your friends or others asking for your time. Sometimes you have to prioritize what you're doing and how you're spending your time. For me, as an example, there was a time when I was a student that the Shockers were making a really deep NCAA basketball tournament run, and I remember I had to not go to some of the games because I had to study. And that's really hard for me because I was and I still am a big basketball fan, but I knew that I had to study and I had to get some things done for class. And, looking back, I wish I could have gone to the game, but, I had to make a tough decision to skip a game or two when the situation called for it. Take advantage of small amounts of time. I think this is a really good tip. Elsie on our team really drafted all these slides. I think she did an awesome job with this. And this is a really great tip to be thinking about. So you may love the app TikTok, you may love Instagram and the reels that you can find on there. But what I might suggest is the 10 or 15 minutes that you might spend on that. You might be able to spend 10 or 15 minutes on studying for a class or listening to your lecture notes if you recorded them through your device. So just try to find ways to make the most of your time, and even 10 or 15 minutes can really make a difference. One thing that really worked for me, and this is probably just another Bobby tip, is that I knew at the end of the day, I would be really tired after a long day of class, and I worked part-time when I was in college, and I had some student activities, so I was just exhausted by the end of the day. So I knew I didn't study well, so if I had a big test, I wouldn't necessarily spend too much time studying late into the night. Like I wouldn't study until 1 or 2 in the morning, and that does work for some students, but I knew I would fall asleep, or I would, I would just feel too tired and I wouldn't really be able to grasp or comprehend the information. So I kind of learned over time the hard way that the best solution for me was actually to get up really early and study, because in the morning I was fresh. I would have a cup of coffee and I would just start studying at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning. And it worked really well for me if my test was at like 8:30 or 9 o'clock in the morning. So again, that's what worked for me. The point here is that you should really find the solution that makes the most sense for you and just kind of the way you're wired. Last thing that's on there, get out of your comfort zone, try new activities on campus, challenge yourself. My friends in the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, they talk about leaning into discomfort. It's okay if you push yourself, and you should push yourself in college. That's a lot of what college is all about, trying some new things, getting to meet people that are not like you, and just having an opportunity to build your friendship in your class network. Some additional tips that we thought of: seek academic support early. Don't wait until the end of the semester if you're not doing well in college or in classes. So again, lots of content on this slide, but we put it all up there because we want to make sure you're thinking about all this stuff. So what extra help in college for your academic support could look like would include meeting with your academic advisor, meeting with some of your peers in your class, and perhaps forming some study groups. Knowing when your faculty members' office hours are, they have to put that on their syllabus and make that very well known. So go ask for help. And if you're struggling in understanding some material, go ask for help. A lot of times, I'm telling you this because I work with faculty every day at the university. They not only want to help you with whatever you're struggling in, but they really appreciate it when someone comes and sees them in their office hours, either virtually or in person. They're there for a reason. And just because you take the trouble to meet them outside the class, that means something to them. And then later, if you're struggling further, or frankly, if you just need a little bit of extra help, extra credit opportunities, they'll remember that you have come in and seen them hopefully multiple times during their office hours. And that might help you bump your grade if you're just within a few points. Every faculty member is different. They can decide how they utilize that. But if you have a relationship with your faculty member, if you're in trouble later in the semester, later in the class, then having gone and visited them multiple times is actually going to help you in that regard. Then the second section that's on here, schedule time to meet with an academic advisor. This should be something that you're doing regularly. For those of you who would be starting your freshman year in college at Wichita State this fall, we have first year advisors who specialize in that first year, that freshman year. We know the first year is really challenging. And so we have academic advisors who are trained up in everything new freshmen need to know about going to college and success strategies. And that's housed in our one stop. So they can not only help you pick your classes, but they're also going to help you with understanding your fee bill. And they're going to help you if you have questions about how to pay your parking ticket or whatever, challenges you run into along the way. That's what our first year advisors will do for you. And then, of course, they're going to help coach you on educational goals, career goals that you may have. They're also going to remind you that there's a lot of centers on campus that are designed to help you be successful. So there's tutoring available. I think on my next slide, I have some specific offices that we'll go into a little further, but there's a math lab that's available that's really going to help you if you're struggling in math. When I was a college student, I struggled in math. And so what I would do was I'd go to the math lab that we have. It still exists on this campus a couple decades later, and I would do my math homework in the class or in the math lab itself, because if I tried to sit and do my math homework in my room, then I'd get distracted. I'd start talking to my roommate. I'd be tempted to turn on the TV or something like that. So I would just go take my calculus homework every day over to the math lab, and then I just work on it. Then if I had a problem, I would just raise my hand and someone in the room would come help me. And it was a free service. It still is a free service that's available for all of our students. Some additional tips for success. I alluded to this earlier. We have something called supplemental instruction. Many colleges have this. I think we actually do this really well at Wichita State. And basically, many of our first year classes and even second year classes that our students have to take, we know some of them are really challenging. And we can tell just based off of our own data and what our students have experienced, which of those are the most difficult. In other words, which ones students might fail or get a D in. So what that means is, for many of those classes, we actually have special what's called SI or supplemental instruction leaders available to help students with those classes. So for me, I took a class called macroeconomics, and it was really just kind of understanding economics. And then for me as a business major, it was really important I do well. Well, I would go to the class just like I'm supposed to, and I would listen to the professor, but sometimes it didn't all click for me. Sometimes it just didn't make sense. So I actually went to a supplemental instruction opportunity, which is free. It's a free resource available at Wichita State, where someone was also taking the class with me, but they had already taken it and they had gotten an A or a B in the class, but then they were basically my tutor for the class and me and the other students who wanted to take advantage of this. And basically they would go through everything that the professor had just covered that particular week, and they would make sure that I understood it and that they helped kind of translate it for me to a level that made sense to me. So I highly recommend it. I'm a huge fan of supplemental instruction and encourage you to look for that no matter where you go to college. Lots of resources and offices on campus. We've talked about some of these already. I mentioned Office of Diversity and Inclusion. We do have something called the Shocker Support Locker, which is available for our students, where if you're struggling, if you have food insecurity, or if you need dental, personal hygiene items, including dental hygiene, I guess, but personal hygiene items, we also have something called the Career Closet. So if you have a need for clothes for a professional interview, for an internship or something like that, all of these things for food insecurity, for personal hygiene items, and this clothing for internships and otherwise, we have free resources on our campus. It's a judgment-free zone. We have all this stuff. We want students to take advantage of it. The other office I would just mention, or a couple that I should mention, the Shocker Career Accelerator. They help students find internship opportunities. They coach you on your resume, your LinkedIn profile. They have a job posting board that's online, obviously called Handshake. It's a really helpful tool for students to find their first job in college. And then, of course, the financial aid office will be ready to help you with anything that you need in terms of paying for your college. So next section, don't be so hard on yourself. I think that's something our first gen students do. Perhaps if you're like me and you're the child of immigrants, you might have a feeling that, or it might feel like you really have to make your parents happy. One of the students in our video kind of talked about that. And so you hold yourself to a really high standard. And so it's okay to hold yourself to a high standard. In fact, I encourage you to do so. But what I would also tell you is don't put too much pressure on yourself. You're not perfect. No one's perfect. And so don't expect perfection, but it's okay to strive to be better and to learn from any failure or shortcomings that you have. And then the last section, prioritize yourself. Don't neglect your mental health. Of course, we're, I think, as a society getting better about addressing mental health, but that doesn't mean that you should ignore that when you're in college. We beg you to consider and think about your mental health, when you're going through classes, when you're involved in activities, when you're working somewhere. It's, of course, really important that you're exercising self-care and whatever works for you. For some of our students, that might mean getting in a really good workout. For other students, it might be joining a fraternity or sorority. For other students, it might be finding a community service outlet or activity that's really important and meaningful for them. And that's their way to exercise some self-care because they're giving back to others in our community. So whatever your strategy is, find it, try multiple strategies until you find the one that works for you, but always remember to take care of yourself. All right, I think that's all that I had in terms of prepared slides. So next, what we're going to do is transition to a few of our current students who are first generation themselves. And so I'm going to ask them to make sure their cameras are on. And let's see if I can find all of them here. I've got a few different things here. Speak up if you're, I think, Gary, I saw you on here. Gary, are you out there somewhere?
Yes, I am. I'm right here.
Okay, great. Hi, Gary. And I see you, Madison. And is Natalie on too? Can't see
Yeah.
her. Okay. Hi, Natalie. Good to see you as well. All right. So these three students are all current Wichita State students. So first of all, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us tonight. I'm sure you could be studying or doing something else with your time, but you are volunteering your time to talk about what it's like to be a first-gen student. So thank you for doing that. I'm going to start just by asking them to introduce themselves, talk about who they are. First of all, introduce themselves, who they are, what they're studying, maybe what hometown and high school you're from, and I think you already said what you're studying. Let's start with that. So Gary, I'm going to pick on you because I see you first.
Okay, sounds good. Well, my name is Gary Tran. I'm a freshman studying aerospace engineering. I went to Rose Hill High School. I'm from Rose Hill. That's a couple miles southeast of here. Yeah, go ahead, Natalie.
My name is Natalie Holguin. I am studying marketing with a minor in graphic design. And I am originally from Topeka, but a little bit north in a small town called Meriden. So I went to Jefferson West High School.
Thank you, Natalie. And Madison.
My name is Madison George. I am studying secondary education for chemistry, and I graduated from Valley Center High School. I'm from Valley Center, Kansas, which is a small town that's just about 20 minutes north of Wichita.
All right. So all of our audience, we encourage you to put questions in the chat. And I would say Dawson and Elsie, if you see some things in the chat that I don't get to, feel free to elevate that and just remind me. I actually see a question out here that I might just throw out there and give you all an opportunity to answer. What could the first gen living community offer me? So this is actually, maybe I should try to help with this one a little bit. Gary and Natalie, I believe you both live on campus, right? So something do either of you live in a living learning community? No, I see. Okay. So Gary, can you explain what the living learning community is? And then I can elaborate. The first gen living learning community is going to be something new this fall. So you didn't even have an opportunity to live in that yet, Gary, but will you talk about your LLC?
Yeah. So I didn't see that the first gen was a thing that we offered, but I'm part of the engineering LLC myself. So it kind of just the whole reason why I wanted to get into it was to surround myself around like-minded people like me. I wanted to meet other engineers. We all basically live on the same floor. Our RA, I believe, is also supposed to be in a similar situation as us too. So he's an engineer. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not, but we do monthly events. We're always reaching out. We all have very similar questions, and we're all living very similar things. So we get to be really close. There's always somebody in our study room down there because, and we're always helping each other. Oh, you're doing this, you're doing this class, you're in this class. So it really does help you when you're trying to surround yourself and try to just be part of that community. And then I guess Bobby can kind of elaborate more of what the first gen is, what it's going to be like.
So as I mentioned, thank you, Gary, for that explanation. So as I mentioned, the first gen living learning community is going to be the first time we've had it this fall. So we're really excited about it. But I think the point of engineering, of Gary living in the engineering community, it's the same thing. We want students who are going through some of the same circumstances and have some of the same challenges and same opportunities in front of them to be able to get to know one another, to perhaps take some of the same classes. Gary mentioned that there's a whole range of activities available. So really, it's just a great way to identify with other students who might come from some of the same walks of life as you. Natalie or Madison, anything, or Natalie, I don't know, I don't remember Madison if you've lived on campus, so apologize that I can't remember that. So Natalie, anything you would add just about living on campus right now?
I think living on campus is honestly super good for me, and I know it works for a lot of other people. It's really nice to be like, sometimes I don't hear about events right away. So living on campus is really great because I can see those postings in the hallways or even walking to class from the dorms. There's certain places that things are hung up. It's really cool. I didn't, like Bobby, I didn't know my roommate before I moved in. And so it was super cool to get to know her and know her story. And now we hang out all the time. She's a super great friend. And that's really exciting. I also think it's a lot easier to stay motivated to go to class. Sometimes when I don't have class until 11 a.m., I'm just like, okay, so I won't go to class, but I don't, because it's just so easy and accessible to get to class since I live on campus. I don't have any extra steps to in my way that would discourage me from going to class. So that's something that really helps me. And it's super cool that there's a lot of people around and I never feel really alone. It's really cool, and there's a really nice sense of community in the dorms, and I really enjoy it. And I'm living on campus all the years that I'm here, so it's really exciting.
All right, thanks, Natalie. There is a question in the chat. I'll just try to address it. It sounds like a family out there might have been told that the living learning community for first gen students might actually already be full. So I'm not positive about that. I have not heard that, but as you can imagine, Housing and Residence Life manages that. So what I would suggest is, if there, last week I had heard that there was still space in other living learning communities. So you might just check to see if there's space in other communities that would make sense for your student and your family. But then I would also encourage you, as you may have caught in the video, we do have that first gen student organization. So certainly another great way to get connected to other first gen students. So there was a question in the chat about scholarships. And so I want to see, the question was about what opportunities exist for first gen scholarships, but I might just see if you all can talk generally about scholarship process. I don't know if anyone's used Scholarship Universe, for example. That might be a good place to start if anyone has utilized that. I see Madison and Gary nodding. I don't know if one of you want to cover that.
Yeah, so I didn't actually use Scholarship Universe. It wasn't around when I was transitioning into college from high school, but the scholarships that I was able to be awarded were ones that I found out through mentors and connections that I made through Wichita State. That's always my biggest piece of advice, is build as many relationships as you can, make as many connections, because you never know where those are going to lead you. And so, I mean, I ended up getting awarded scholarships that I didn't even know about before, but these people that I made these connections with at the university saw the opportunities and feel like it would be great for me and push them along. And then I was able to be awarded those. So that's a really great way to figure out about this stuff. But also Scholarship Universe is something I wish would have been around whenever I was in high school, just because everything is all in one place. And I mean, from what I've been told, is you can apply to multiple scholarships with only one application. So it makes it super accessible.
Thank you, Madison.
Yeah, going off what Madison was talking about, and how they have like that one application, and it was specifically for engineering, and it was like going to like 150 scholarships, and it was one application with like 4 or 5 essays, which is kind of a lot. But when you think that it's just one submission for all these scholarships. It was super, super nice. Another one that was on there was DSI, so Distinguished Scholarship Invitational. That was on Scholarship Universe. I believe Wallace was as well. That's a specific engineering one. And whatever major you're going into, they're going to have specific colleges scholarships for those. So yeah.
Great.
I can also say I did use the Scholarship Universe, and I just did. I spent like 20 minutes one day answering some questions about myself and like my major and stuff. And like Gary and Madison said, it applies for a lot of scholarships. And I know specifically with business, a lot of the scholarships that are on there are a lot of money. And so I applied for like 45 with just one application, and 2 of them are in review right now because the early bird deadline was February 1st for those, and they are like add up to $20,000. So that's pretty good, and I'm really excited about that. But there are scholarships that go around all the time, and you just got to keep an eye out, and they're super helpful. And I think Wichita State really is good about pushing and showing those to us, and I just have really enjoyed the experience. And it's not as hard or as scary as I thought it was when I first started applying when I was a senior. So
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, everyone. Robert asked a question specifically for Gary. What would you say is the greatest struggle as a first-gen aerospace engineering student?
Okay. Well, Robert, thanks for the question. I think the main struggle, it kind of takes in a bunch of aspects, but it's kind of just like trying to stay above the water and kind of just like, I guess, surviving. And that kind of takes in with one, learning how college works, how to study, how to manage going to class, finding friends to do homework with, so you're not by yourself and isolated all the time. And then also like trying to stay involved and make friends, just so you're mentally like balanced in that way. And then also it's a very rigorous degree. So just having to spend so much time studying, or kind of like that kind of whole culmination of struggles kind of just is the great struggle for me. So I hope that kind of gives you like a better idea of like what the main struggle is. I guess it's just a bunch of little struggles that make it a big struggle.
Thanks, Gary. Let's see. Talia asks, do you think it's harder for first-gen students than students whose parents went to college? Who wants to take that?
I can answer that one. I think that having parents that go to college definitely has a benefit because they kind of know what to expect, even if it was a little while ago. Colleges, universities, they go through phases of change, but the experience and what to expect is the same. Going to class is the same and things like that. So for me, I was very scared, and I had people in my family that were like, oh, your cousin said that they were going to go to college and they didn't go. And so it was really discouraging at first, but I think that, yeah, it can be harder, but you just got to have that grit and determination and know that this is something that you want to do to, in the long run, benefit you. And I think having that mindset and believing in yourself is really big. And that's what really helped me to feel better, and then kind of put me at an equal position with my friends their parents went to college. But then it's also nice to have people whose parents went to college, because I can listen to them too and pick up what they know.
Great. Madison, I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask you to talk about, I know you are graduating and you are looking for that first job. So not even necessarily in the framework of the first gen background you have, but maybe just what advice do you have as you're kind of venturing into finding your first job in college? And if you're comfortable, give us a little update. I was curious what the plans are. I know what you were looking at. I'm curious where you are.
Yeah, so I actually did accept a position for next school year. So I'll be teaching chemistry at May South High School next year, if I have any May South people on here. But kind of the biggest piece of advice that I learned throughout these last 4 years of navigating college as a first gen student kind of goes into the question I was asked, is don't try to compare your transition to college to anyone else's, whether they're first gen or not. Everyone's transition looks different. And so you just kind of have to, again, figure out what works the best for you, kind of cling tight to your dreams and your goals for yourself, and your motivation to reach those goals eventually. And then also just find your support system as early on as you can, whether that's your family, your friends, your peers and classmates in class, people that are in a student organization with you, or mentors and faculty members. Those are the people for you to lean on in your hardest times, but that will also celebrate you with all the accomplishments that you're going to have over the next 4 years. So just find those people early on, and then just be proud of yourself for all you've accomplished already. There's no like end saying like, I am not happy until I have graduated. As I'm nearing graduation, I'm realizing that these last 4 years have flown by really fast, but now I also look back at everything I accomplished throughout the last 4 years that I wish I would have celebrated and given myself more credit for, that have built up to this big thing that I'm super proud about myself for. So I don't know if that fully answers what you're wanting me to talk about, Bobby, but those are just some of my biggest pieces of advice that I found.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I saw Madison at a career fair recently where there was different employers there, different school districts who were looking for people, and being a teacher is a highly sought after skill these days. So I know you had a lot of opportunity. So glad you're going to be in the Wichita community, the greater Wichita community. So all right, other advice, Gary and Natalie, Madison, anything that we did not cover as a tip that you would recommend that people seek out, or just advice you have in general about being a successful first gen student?
I'll go first.
Okay,
Oh,
go, Natalie. No, you got it.
First gen students are too courteous to one another. That's another thing, right? Natalie, we'll go ahead and let you go first.
Okay. Well, I saw a question pop up that asked about on-campus jobs, and I have an on-campus job. I actually work in the Office of Admissions, so not to brag, but it's kind of one of the best jobs out there. And so finding that job was really easy. I think Handshake is a very good resource. I also kind of recommend looking into LinkedIn a little bit. I know that that has helped me not only find this job that I'm in now, but it's helping me look towards internships in the future. And those are kind of scary thoughts, but it's easier when you have, like Madison said, those support systems. And I think finding things that keep you in a routine. So like my admissions job, I work a very specific set of time each week, and that really helps me stay in the groove of things. And so I recommend doing that.
Great. Thanks, Natalie. Anybody else have anything in particular you recommend or other tips we'd offer?
Yeah, so I just kind of like wanted to like reiterate to everybody that like I think like being involved is like one of the best things you can do in college. It really does like make your college experience. Like I'm still only a freshman, so I'm only as involved as I can possibly get. But I'm like super excited to get involved in the incoming years. And then also just like reaching out for help. Like don't be scared to go to tutoring because you think they all look at you like you're dumb for getting tutoring. And that's not the case. They're all there to help. Or just finding a mentor or like the on-campus opportunity where they're able to kind of like understand your perspective and help you navigate through your problems. Those are like two things that I just like really wanted to like reiterate, that those like really do help. And then one like, I guess like weird piece of advice that helped me not be as nervous as transitioning to college was like, I watched a lot of like day in the life videos of like a college student just to get like a better perspective. Not all of them are like realistic because they need good content, but like it really does like get a scope of like how much they do study, how much they are in class, and kind of like balancing their social life. And you know, some are way different than others. So that's like one thing that like helps me out.
That's great. Thanks, Gary. Madison, anything you would add that we haven't talked about?
I would just emphasize that too. Getting involved really does help you, especially if you may feel like you're struggling to find that support system to help you through the next 4 years. Getting involved is a great way to do that, especially with the many student organizations that we have, because then you're really around like-minded people, whether that is something within your academic college or maybe something you just enjoy doing for fun, like a hobby. And yeah, really anything I've said before, find your support systems early on as you can, and don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are so many resources and people on campus that are there and they want to help you. Don't ever feel like you're being a bother to them.
Yeah, it's great advice, Madison. You know, a couple of students that you all probably know, I won't say their names, but they recently reached out to me and asked me to write recommendation letters for them. And the way they approached it was like, hey, Bobby, I'm so sorry to bother you. And you know, they were like apologizing to ask for, frankly, a favor from me, and that's to write a recommendation letter. But I frankly told both of them, actually there's 3 students, and I told all 3 of them, like, no, I would be so honored to write a recommendation letter for you because I know them and I know how awesome they are, and I want them to have the award or the scholarship or the job that they're going for. And so I don't think I'm unique in that regard. I think there's a lot of people on this campus who are dedicated to helping our students be successful. And so don't feel like you're a bother, ask questions. We are committed to your success. And you know, we're not perfect. I don't mean to make it sound like everyone is going to help you solve every problem. That's not reality. But the reality is, I think there are more people who want to help you solve problems here than the opposite side of that. So all right, we're kind of over on time, but any other final advice or questions from our audience? If audience and guests, if you have any questions, you could throw them in the chat. But maybe as we're thinking, there's a good resource that I think some of the staff are throwing in the chat if you want to check out some day in the life videos on our TikTok account. There's another question from Robert. I have another question for, as a student who comes from out of state, how is Wichita? What's the feel of Wichita? That's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. I think all of our students, we have a nice mixture of experiences here, a couple from relatively nearby, but not exactly in Wichita, and then one perspective from a couple hours away. So maybe Natalie, I'll pick on you since you had to travel the furthest to attend Wichita State.
I love Wichita. I think that my hometown had a lot of benefits for sure, and it was very developmental for me and helped me grow as a person. But Wichita is helping me grow a little bit further and helping me kind of develop into the adult that I am. And I think it's great. The feel of the city, it's the biggest city in Kansas, and so that's pretty impressive. And I grew up near the capital city of Kansas, and so it's very different from where I grew up. There's a lot more people here and a lot more things to do, but it's also not very far from, it's not very loud. It's easy to get away and feel like I don't know how to quite explain it, but to feel content and like not so busy and hectic. I know some cities, for me, that's like Kansas City is very hectic to me. And so I could never go there, but that's why I like Wichita, because there are so many opportunities to go out and experience things you may not have experienced before, but it's also a great place to come home to at night and settle down and listen and be quiet. And before I lived like 1 mile within a train track, so it's a lot more quieter than that, and I'm glad that I don't hear the trains every night. I hear them sometimes, but Wichita is a really great city, and it's very diverse, and it's very cool to see all the different kinds of people and how they embrace Wichita. So I really, really love it here.
Yeah. And I can kind of give like a different perspective too. Like I think I love like the small town feel of, I wouldn't say it's not like a small town feel, but like you can definitely tell it's like a very closer knit community. And I also have a couple friends from the Dallas area and the San Antonio area too. And some comments they've made is like very similar to that smaller town feel. Especially when they go to a high school with 2,000 kids or even more than that. They have 800 in their graduating class. Definitely, like I would say Wichita State is definitely not that size, and we are definitely a smaller school. So if that's kind of like what you're kind of expecting from Wichita State, I would kind of say kind of shift away from that. And I think there's plenty of things to do if you really do like make the best of it. You will meet amazing people here. There's all sorts of, there's people that come from everywhere. I got a buddy from Iowa, and we got all from Nebraska and Missouri and California and Texas. Like we got people from everywhere. Super, super cool. It's just that I think kind of that transition from everything's bigger in Texas, because that's, you know, how everything, like when they talk about everything's bigger in Texas, it is a little bit smaller if you're coming from a bigger town from Texas.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I think, okay, I was going to see if Madison wanted to add anything to that. What I might just offer, I know you didn't really ask me as the students, but I would just offer that, you know, I think as a city our size, we offer a lot of things that you might be familiar with in terms of shopping, restaurants, in a bigger town or bigger city, but with like way less traffic, really easy commutes, or for obviously those living on campus, really no commutes, but real accessibility to arts, concerts, attractions that typically come to large towns. We have a large downtown arena. We have a downtown baseball stadium with a semi-pro baseball team. We have a hockey team that's downtown as well. So we have, you know, kind of the things that you might want or need in a larger city, but we can offer the smaller college vibe at the same time with being, you know, certainly a full college campus. So. All right, so we're a little over on time. I do want to thank Gary, Madison, and Natalie for joining us tonight and sharing their perspectives. I know you all are very busy. Appreciate your time tonight.
Of course. Thank you for having us, Bobby.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, so just the last couple of things and we're really going to be done. I know we have a lot of seniors that were joining us tonight. If you haven't already applied for admission, I highly encourage you to do that now. Time is running short until the fall semester, so just would highly encourage you to do that if you haven't already taken care of that. For those of you who might be juniors, the application for you will open up later this summer, July 1st to be exact, and we put the admissions criteria on there. When you do complete the admission application, there will be a box for you to check that essentially answers the question if you have had a parent graduate from a four-year university. The last thing that I'll just share is our social media. There was some questions about blogs, or excuse me, there were some questions, I see blogs on the screen. There were some questions about day in the life experiences that Gary, I think, wisely brought up. And so here's some resources that you can utilize to try to find those day in the life experiences. You can see all of our social media linked on there. The other thing that I really want to make sure I plug is that you all, as if you're a senior and you're admitted to attend Wichita State this fall, you're invited to a day called WSU, that's WSYOU. A little higher up in the chat, you'll see a link for it, but the short link is wichita.edu/WSYOU, and it's a day just for admitted students. The reason I really want to point that out for all of us in the first gen community is that we will have a very specific, what we call huddle session, where you can meet other first gen students and really kind of just have some opportunities, share social media handles, get to know some other first gen students who are going to be having some of the same experiences as you this fall at Wichita State. I would also add that there's been a few questions about jobs. We're also going to have an on-campus jobs fair as part of that experience. So if you are knowing you want to work on campus somewhere, bring your resume, be ready to talk to some on-campus employers, because some of them will actually make hiring decisions based off the conversations they have, and at least others will collect resumes and follow up and schedule an interview a little bit later on. So again, it is Saturday, March 25th. There is a link in the chat, but in case you can't find it, it's wichita.edu/WSYOU. All right, that's really all that we had to share tonight. I want to thank everyone for being here. And I want to thank again my colleagues Dawson and Elsie for being here and monitoring the chat and helping with the attendance tonight. Hope you all have a great night. Thanks for being here and enjoy your evening.